Alright, so we're going to look at the principal square root of a negative number. And it states for any positive real number b, the principal square root of a negative number, which is negative b, is defined as. So we have the square root of negative b is equal to I times the square root of b. Now this may seem very foreign to you, but let me put this in perspective whereas before, if you were given something, let's say the square root of 16, the radicand, which is 16, we can take the square root of that, which is, it would give us 4, because we're saying what two numbers that when we square would give us 16. But the principal square root of a negative number says that if or when you have a negative radicand, you are to take out the negative factor, the -1 factor. So what this means is that we're going to take out the square root of -1 from that 16. Because in essence, when we're taking the square root of a radicand, the radicand needs to be positive. So the rule says that we're going to take out the square root of -1. And remember, the square root of -1 is I. Remember this rule. So take the square root of -1. That will be I. Take the square root of 16, which is 4. And then multiply those together. And we have 4i. So here we have the square root of -4 minus the square root of -36. Now we just can't subtract the two radicals together, because in order for us to subtract two radicals together, the radicand, meaning the number under the radical, must match. These two must match, the radicand and the index. And the index for both of the radicals is 2. So let's simplify the square root of -4. You're taking out the -1 factor. So let's say take the square root of -1 and we have the square root of 4. The square root of -1 is I. The square root of 4 is 2. Therefore, the square root of -4 is 2i minus, let's do the same thing for the square root of -36. We are taking out the -1 factor from the -36. So we have the square root of -1 times the square root of 36. Take the square root of -1, which is I. Take the square root of 36, which is 6. And we have 6i. Now we have 2i minus 6i. We have like parts, or we can say like imaginary. And because they're like, we can subtract the 2 and 6 and we keep the variable or the imaginary unit I. So 2 minus 6 gives us -4 and we keep the I. That is our solution. Let's do another example. C. We have 3 times the square root of -25 plus 4 times the square root of -36. So without showing the work, tell me what would be the square root of -25. That would be 5i. So we're going to take the 5i, multiply it to the 3. That gives us 15i. Let's look at the next one. 4 times the square root of -36. Well, we did -36, square root of that. So we're saying 4 times 6i, multiply the 4 and 6i, we have 24i. And here again, just like in part or example B, We have like imaginary parts. So we can add 15 and 24, which is 39, and then we keep our I. And there we go.